Yeah, I did that thing, but
Yeah, it seems to be working for me unless it shuts off. We'll see. Give it a second. I think it's recording okay right now.
okay, then you deal with that.
Yeah, it looks like it's recording. Let's get started and welcome folks as they come in. Welcome everyone who is present. Thank you so much for being here. My name is not info@Familia TQLM. I just can't change it on my phone right now. My name is Maria La Saba. She and they and open pronouns work well for me. Something's up with my computer. Hopefully it'll work soon. This is is it 95th or 96th webinar?
97th.
Oh my, 97th webinar. So props to all that work and props to joining us, and folks tuning in later, welcome. This is the Gender and Sexuality webinar every first Tuesday of the month. Tonight we're focusing on criminalization of queer and trans peoples, communities, siblings, ourselves. So thank you for joining this conversation. In most of these meetings, we try to start with sharing one of our Stop LAPD Spying Coalition principles as a way for folks joining to know what we're grounded in. And also with today's principle, we hope to invite you to share about yourself, and if anything comes up for you when you hear this principle, you're welcome to share in your check-in we'll do shortly. Does anyone want to read it? Just want to open it up for more voices in this space. This is the one we chose for tonight. And it's hard for me to see, so if you just want to unmute and jump in, feel free.
I don't mind reading.
Awesome.
So the Grassroots Community Self-Defense Statement of Principles from Stop LAPD Spying Coalition and the Principal Scene. Power is within our communities. We affirm that power is within community and not with state and federal governments or profit-driven and warmongering corporations. We build power by being clear in our demands that instruments of state violence be abolished, not just reformed or refined. We commit to the abolition of all state interventions that prevent our full autonomy and liberation.
Thank you, Madeline. Appreciate you reading it. We'll just let all that sink in as we read it and process. Power is within our communities as one of our principles of struggle. I invite you to share your name, where you're coming from, pronouns if that feels comfortable for you, and any examples you might have related to power is within our communities. And I can just finish introducing myself and add what I'm thinking and pass it to someone if that's okay. Again, Maria La Saba, I'm in LA, and I've been with the coalition since we started back in 2011. Earlier, my example of powers within our communities was related to just family and raising babies, and how helpful it is to have a village or have more community members, family helping. And I just think about colonization and capitalism and different things that make family life more isolated and less village-like. So that was my most current example or feeling I'm coming into the meeting. And other than that, I've also been thinking about powers within our communities. I'm also been very active in immigrant rights work. And here and there, I keep hearing nothing is moving in immigration. And that kind of sentiment related to seeing not a lot of legislation move I'm not really into that. that I don't. I think people move change. So I really don't like to base movement or change on what is possible within state legislation in the moment, or allowing that to define how we make change happen. That's all the other feeling I'm coming with. Who's feeling that and like to go next? Now we could popcorn, and you can also pass. It's not mandatory to speak. It's just encouraged to build trust and get to know who's in the space, which is also really important, and especially in this line of work. And I just want to see if anyone feels ready to share next. If not, I'll pass it to, I see you, Matios. Would you like to share?
Yeah. Hey, folks. My name is Matios. I use he, him pronouns with Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. And I guess we just talked about how the principle lands on us. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, powers within our communities. I think in the past year or so, the definition of community has kind of broadened for me to mean kind of like any type of connection. And so like thinking as a community organizer, like I feel like my work is contingent upon building authentic connections and like building community in that way. So just even being like transparent and moving authentically within this space and communicating that, I feel like is an important component of making those connections with all you all, building that community, and in building that community, building collective power and projecting it for our collective liberation. So that's kind of where my head's been at. And I'll pass it to whomever wants it, or I could popcorn it. You know, I'm going to popcorn it. I'll pass it to Meraki, because I'm pretty sure they're on this call.
Hey, can you hear me all right? Hey, I'm Meraki. I use she, they pronouns. I'm sorry, what else did you ask? I'm so sorry. Is that it?
No,
And how does powers within our communities, the principle we're rounding in tonight? If you want to share an example, it could be a story, or just how it resonates with you or not.
Okay, yes. Power within our communities. I mean, the way it resonates with me, it says it right there as well, but it resonates as abolition, 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 right? It's just fully taking on that sort of idea and putting it in practice and putting it as a form of community care and a form of self-care and a form of building power within ourselves and within our community. I hope that answered that. Should I popcorn it?
Yeah, thank you for that. And yes, welcome to, and folks, welcome to pass.
Okay, I'll pass it to, is it Jamie? Okay.
Yeah, Jamie, she, her. I typically live in LA, although at the moment I'm living with my parents in Central Virginia. And I would say one thing that kind of resonated with me was the idea of mutual aid, which is something that we can do for each other in our communities that the state can't interfere with or take away from us. And I'll pass to Hamid.
Thank you. Greetings, everybody. Hamid, he, him, with Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, and just echoing everything that folks have said, but just also want to add that, you know, how do we almost kind of desensationalize this notion of power itself? Because many times when we speak about power, it is sort of like, you know, there's different things conjuring up, you know, just in a way. But for me, the assessment of power or being empowered is just the daily sort of even conversations and relationship building. Just earlier on, before this thing started, I was just talking about allergies and, you know, just like how my allergies are messing me up, and just to kind of folks sharing, different ways that they deal with this thing. Just something very basic, is very empowering. That is coming from my community, my chosen community, from my folks, and so to just even like just breaking bread, that is so empowering. So yeah, so it definitely is, which we in a way just reminds me constantly that how much power is within our communities. So just wanted to share that. And I will popcorn it over to Nina.
Hey y'all, my name is Nee or Nina. I use she, they pronouns. And powers within our communities. I feel like just echoing what someone also had mentioned about mutual aid. I've been thinking a lot about that as well. And also like even in like creating that as well, it's like in communities, right, how we navigate differently than like for example a nonprofit or like the state who like relies heavily on like service providing or like on like this like we need to gather this data or we need to like hit our quotas, but never really about like actually building with one another and like taking the time, whether it's like doing food distro or sharing a meal together, but the ways in which like in our communities, how like even in the pandemic and at the height of the pandemic, how folks that have very limited resources still like find the power and find the ability to continue to build outside of the state, knowing what their neighbors kind of like what they could share and kind of like that same skill sharing as well. So I've been sitting a lot with like the how mutual aid is such a like it's such a principled and such a like rooted in like abolition as well by yeah, by like not having to like have certain restrictions, but also just like considering the needs of a community and building stronger communities. So definitely sitting with the mutual aid and echoing what someone also had mentioned. And I will popcorn it to Farzana.
I think Farzana usually participates listening in. So welcome. Good to see you here. And we can pass it to someone else. Would you like to pass it to someone else, Nee?
Yeah, definitely. Isaiah, would you feel comfortable sharing? Oh, cool. And just I see in the chat Isaiah, he, him, el pronouns. Sorry, I'm sick, but yeah, just helping people.
Sweet. Maybe Madeline or Chella. Feel better soon. From Mateos to you, Isaiah.
Just echoing what everyone else said. Oh yeah, I should begin with, my name is Madeline. I use they, them pronouns. I'm from Tucson, and yeah, just to echo what everyone said is that I'm very involved in mutual aid, and I think it's great to think about like specifically around food justice. And I think it's awesome to think about like a world without grocery stores and a world without factory farming and without you know, taxes and poverty and hunger, by providing mutual aid and yeah, just taking the power that we have in our community and passing it along, you know, distributing the privileges to historically marginalized folks. And then I think there was one more person left. I can't see the.
I'll go.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. I'm Chella. I go by she and they. I'm in Tongvaland in Los Angeles. I've been a part of Stop LAPD Spying since 2014, I want to say. I think of something me and my friend were talking about last night was dual power and thinking around like, even just like thinking of what it's really going to take for us to win these like battles, right? I think in terms of there's going to be a fight and we have to get ready because they didn't bring this stuff to us peacefully, so we have to get rid of it violently, and that's going to include some bloodshed. Sorry, y'all. I'm going to be real. Shelly keeps it real. But yeah, I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. And if someone didn't go, they can go next.
I think that is everybody. Thank you all for sharing and chiming in. Appreciate getting to know each other. And we want to just, keep this in what you shared in heart and mind and in our vision as we have a conversation around criminalization of our trans and queer communities. To keep up. We have a hand up I see from Matios is letting me know. Did I miss somebody? Oh, sorry about that, Brad. I see you. Would you like to share before we continue? Welcome you. Take your time to unmute.
Hey there, I can't get the video up for some reason. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Brad Edwards, he, him pronouns. And I think that, in regards to what Hamid was talking about, really kind of expanding the definition of what power is, the police and the state, they're kind of the illusion of power, but they're not real power. Real power is community, and real power is, I think, an organization like Stop LAPD Spying just doing all the great things that it's doing and being able to kind of paint the landscape of what police are actually doing and being able to hold them accountable. And yeah, I'm just excited to learn and grow more in this community of real power and not just the illusion of it.
Thank you, Brad. Sorry I missed you earlier. And
That's
thank you for sharing that as well. But just keeping all of that to ground in for our conversation around criminalization of our power, of our people power, of each other. I think we're gonna get into a video right now, if I'm not mistaken, to show some of that community power, to taking it back to Silvia Rivera. We'll show the video and then we can debrief a bit. Thanks for tuning in.
Let her speak. Just a moment. Just a moment. Just a moment. I would like to avoid any trouble. This is a day of unity for us. I want us to be happy.
All right, it's up to the gay people. What do you want to do?
Listen, we don't know what you want. Now, do you want these people to speak? Wait a minute, wait, please wait. Please wait. Will the people who want it say yes? That's the end of the conversation. She is speaking. I said the same thing. You're right. nothing. I've been trying to get up here all day for your gay brothers and your gay sisters in jail that write me every motherfucking week and ask for your help. And you all don't do a goddamn thing for them. Have you ever been beaten up and raped in jail? Now think about it. They've been beaten up and raped after they haven't spent much of their money in jail to get their cell phones and try to get their sex change. The women have tried to fight for their sex changes or to become women of the women's liberation. And they write STAR, not the women's group. They do not write women. They do not write men. They write STAR because we're trying to do something for them. I have been to jail. I have been raped and beaten many times by men, heterosexual men that do not belong in the homosexual shelter. But do you do anything for them? No. You all tell me to go and hide my tail between my legs. I will not longer put up with this shit. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all? Think about that. I do not believe in a revolution, but you all do. I believe in the gay power. I believe in us getting our rights, or else I would not be out there fighting for our rights. That's all I wanted to say to your people. If you all want to know about the people that are in jail, and do not forget Bambi Lamore and Dora Marks, Kenny Messner, and other gay people that are in jail, come and see the people at Star House on 12th Street, on 640 East 12th Street, between B and C, apartment 14. The people that are trying to do something for all of us, and not men and women that belong to a white middle class, white club. And that's what you all belong to. Revolution now! Give me a G! Give me an A! Give me a Y! Give me a P! Give me an O! Give me a W! Give me an E! Give me an R! Gay power! Louder gay power! We're gonna do it again. Okay. Elena.
Thank you, Me, for playing it, and Kim, she'll be joining us after 7. Who suggested that we share Silvia Rivera, power and call for power, gay power, and intervening too. This webinar is a preview to our June webinar during Pride Month, and the need to continue in that spirit of disrupting when Pride or queer rights get watered down or whitewashed or co-opted, infiltrated by police and capitalism, etc. And putting a spotlight on folks who are criminalized, gay, trans, and queer folks who are currently in prisons, detention centers. Just feeling the spirit of that cry. I don't know if there's any other reflections any folks want to share before we continue into our conversation. And my computer it didn't ever turn on. I don't know what's wrong. So I don't have any of my notes too. If anyone has or need with the video, if you have access to reference on where and when that took place, or any background you want to add.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that was as Mariela had stated, that was a suggestion as well from Kim to play that video. But it comes from in 1973, the Gay Pride rally in New York City. And so you have Silvia Rivera going there, and also like the power too in calling that, and calling folks in, like where you hear folks in the crowd like collectively booing folks, and collectively booing Silvia Rivera for calling out the washing out of the movement, and the ways in which, like, I think about like different movements as well, like even you see it as well with like immigrants, with the immigrant rights movement as well, of like for the sake of sometimes trying to get certain rights or get recognized by the state, how oftentimes we end up choosing to like dismiss and kind of just focus on single issues, when we know that like if we don't address and we don't confront the like intersections of our oppressions, and the intersections of how like policing, how like the policing of gender and sexuality, and how all these things also affect how we do a disservice for the 7 generations. And so I think it speaks as well to the power in that, and like what Hamid also had kind of echoed in the beginning, about like who defines power as well. And so like the power in that room to like be able to call out folks, because that also is like, that's draining too, but that's like the difference between survival as well as like speaking truth, even when you have folks constantly telling you that like it's not the time, or like for whatever reason try to dismiss that. But it speaks to like, yeah, it speaks to the larger like ideas of what power means, and taking up that space, and calling out that when we do see it in our communities, when we do see it in movement building as well.
Thank you, Nee. I'm opening it up if there are any other comments, reflections. And then I don't have the agenda at hand, but I believe we're going to get into some more examples of current criminalization, especially of trans youth. And then later in the agenda, when Kim joins, we're going to do some recap around the work we've been doing with criminalization of sex workers, and building on that. Also, comments are welcome in the chat if you don't feel like speaking them out loud.
Yeah, and we also wanted to talk about, or kind of spend time to also look at and like dive into the like recent legislations as well that are taking place, and the ways in which the state is currently attacking. And we know that like this attack is like, there are ongoing attacks on queer and trans community members as well. And so the ways in which like currently the anti-trans and queer legislation. And so I want to leave also space in like both in the chat, or folks would want to unmute themselves as well to talk about maybe what they've heard, legislations that they've seen as well, and the ways in which they will criminalize and target queer and trans community members as well. So I'm going to leave it open to both the chat, but if folks want to chime in, but just when that kind of one that I guess I could start us off and name is one in Florida right now, which is it's called the Don't Say Gay or Trans bill, and I believe it's under HB 1557, but that one's specific in Florida. But if folks have also other examples, or have like would want to chime in about like the different legislations, please feel free to either unmute or to also add it on the chat.
Here in Arizona, the day before Trans Day of Visibility, the governor, Doug Ducey, as I like to say, um, passed both two bills, one banning trans women to participate in sports, and the second was for our trans youth, prohibiting them from starting transition, medical transition with hormones or surgery, which was really disappointing because like cis youth can have surgery, like breast augmentation or reduction, under 18, but it is now prohibited for transgender youth. So those are two that just happened in Arizona, which I know folks that directly are impacted by these transphobic bills.
Thank you for sharing those. Was that Madeline? Did I miss who? I think that was you, right, Madeline?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Thank you. Yeah, and yeah, as you're sharing those two, there's space to unpack that some more, and there's space for future conversations to bring in folks, or just to connect with more folks on the ground who you mentioned are directly impacted. And then I don't know if you're familiar with Mariposas Sin Fronteras, but they're in Tucson. It's an organization out there who I'm also connected with. Maybe we could see what other possibilities there are to support each other.
Absolutely. I thought I recognized you from the last meeting, so.
We're already.
Mm-hmm.
You're with the comité, is it?
Yeah, Mariposas, TASN, formerly TASN.
Sweet. Yeah, I didn't know those two laws just passed.
Oh wow, yeah. It was
Last Thursday.
The day before Trans Day of Visibility.
Wow. Yeah, let's make more space to talk and do about it here. Anyone else have information on other legislation? Unfortunately, there's more. And then Ni or Chela too, if you wanna share more around the Florida bill. I know that one's also recent. And we held a webinar last year around as some of these anti-trans youth bills were coming up. So here they are. What was predicted around more states passing more is happening right now.
Not to dominate the conversation, I'd really like to open it up because I'm not as informed as I would like to be. But I remember that there was something in Texas about like mandated reporting for transgender youth, or like for medical, like doctors, teachers, social workers. And I think that really exemplifies above all like the power of the state in this oppression, because they have the control over people doing what they want. And it kind of shows you, like, similarly, like there are no good cops. Like I feel like that put people in a position to be like, there are no good social workers, or there are no good doctors, when there are these structures, these oppressive structures that overrule them. So I'd like to open that up if anyone has more information, context, words about the significance.
Yeah, I haven't heard much about the one in Texas, so I'm curious to see if anyone else here might have more context or more information as well. I know for the Florida bill, the 1557, the Don't Say Gay or Trans bill, that one I believe was passed on March 8th. And that piece of legislation like blocks teachers from talking about LGBTQ issues. Um, Within the classroom setting, and it's really focused on like not involving or not bringing it within what like the education system or what they consider appropriate for youth or for students. And so that was the one in Florida, and I know that there's also a legislation, SB 1138 in Arizona, the Children Deserve Help Not Harm. And that one specifically, it prohibits any minors, regardless of parental consent, from undergoing gender um, gender affirming surgeries or hormone replacement therapy, and force any minors already undergoing HRT to discontinue their treatments. And I know Kim had also brought up in Rhode Island as well. There's Bill 7539. And also like in highlighting like it doesn't only happen in red states, but it also how like democratic or states that are considered to be more liberal or more democratic leaning are also engaging in anti-trans and anti-queer legislation as well.
Off that point about mostly, blue states or, quote unquote liberal states, even in those areas, anti-LGBTQ legislation getting pretty far along. Here in Virginia, there was a so-called religious freedom bill that would allow nonprofits and other institutions basically to discriminate against LGBTQ people on specifically on that basis, that passed the Virginia House, which would have been pretty unprecedented a few years ago, I think. And it did die in the Senate, but it did get like frighteningly far along in the process towards actually becoming law.
I just want to name, I want to pass facilitation to Ni or Chela. As I'm here with Yoali. Yoali's joining us. But I'm definitely hearing.
I have a white tongue, guys.
All right, real quick, you're going to share a white tongue. Or is that a tooth? It's a marshmallow.
It's a tooth falling out.
Oh, yummy tooth.
It's in my tooth because it's a marshmallow.
Look, I was definitely picking up on the mandated reporting, and that's something, I don't know if there was some connection being made around CVE, the countering violent extremism, the mandated teacher social workers, and then the Texas bills around other quote unquote professionals who are also being mandated. But I didn't get to hear all those details. I just want to but I did, yeah, that's what I picked up on right now. Past facilitation as I'm present with us all.
Mateos, did you want to unmute? I know you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on some possible connections to CV. I saw Brad made that comment about the deputization of academics and social workers and educators and school therapists for sure. And that's something we saw recently with our targeted violence and terrorism prevention, which is the rebrand of countering violent extremism, which if folks don't know are two Department of Homeland Security grants meant to target extremism. But the way they do that is by looking for these risk factors in youth that often have to do with their culture or their behavior or them being too much into their religion. And then we've also seen this burgeoning, I guess, pathologizing of dissent and trying to make like hate or extremism or anything else diagnosable like a disease. And that's more so speaking to the deputization of mental health workers. And this has been legitimized by academics like David Eisenman in UCLA. And so, yeah, my big fear about hearing all this legislation is like, in these quote unquote red states, they can kind of a little more overtly criminalize, people's sexual identity. But I think what we find in places like LA is they still criminalize like things that don't fit into the within cis heteronormativity or white supremacy. They just do it in these sophisticated ways. And so my big fear is that we'll start seeing that here through those avenues.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. And I think the one connection that what folks were kind of talking about as far as like the deputization. I know that one thing that we also we talk about it a lot in the coalition, as well as like the community policing and the ways in which LAPD, and not only LAPD but policing in general, how they are often trying to expand their ability to police the community in different ways. And we see it locally with like the CVE programs as well, and like the TBTP grant, but also in other different ways as well. And so like the deputization of mental health professionals, as well as like of folks in the medical settings as well, how that's often like also utilized and deputized as well whenever the state wants to. And so that's always something that is like that we talk about as well, like of how the police state also tries to expand their powers by continuing to do that as well, by forcing folks to become mandate reporters. And also like we also know there's folks in the communities that are happy to be that mandated reporter, are happy to report and to like target and to utilize the police state and the different tactics and laws to be able to target certain folks in the communities. And so that's something that like we're sitting with as well. And when we were kind of thinking about the community policing and in the role that community policing plays, one thing that we also, a question that we had posed as well was like how do we have internalized settler logics of gender and sexuality? How does that inform, like how do we also police gender and sexuality as well? And so I'm going to put the questions as well in the chat, but I would love to hear other folks and like what those two questions kind of bring in mind, as far as like how we both police gender and sexuality, and how like those concepts of gender and sexuality come from a settler logic. I see we have some shy folks on the call today. And the two questions, just to reiterate, it's how have we internalized settler logics of gender and sexuality, and how does community police gender and sexuality?
I could talk on it maybe a little bit. I feel like we have very much so, colonized versions of even like how we view people's identity, people's pronouns usage. Like we are often having very, we have a very colonized way of viewing people's pronouns, of talking to people, identifying with people. And so community policing sort of happens within people's gender and sexuality when we're like, no, you're not supposed to identify that way. You have to sort of align with the binary or not exist. And so, I feel like there's so many ways that we've internalized settler logics, but that's one way that's really impactful, but maybe kind of smaller.
Thanks for naming that, Maraki. And do other folks have any reflections or want to speak to how we've internalized those ideas or those notions of gender and sexuality, or how we in community tend to police gender and sexuality, or maybe examples of how that's happened?
I feel I'm pregnant right now. It's my third pregnancy leading to birthing. I've also had pregnancies leading to abortions too. Just naming that, but I'm naming that because a lot of policing happens just being pregnant. There's so much gendering that happens right from the womb. That's why I choose to birth without getting any information on the baby's sex, because there's just so much just pressure around that. Just that usually tends to be one of the first questions that I get, and I noticed it with my first pregnancy with Yoali, and it just felt so heavy. How inclined people socially were just to know a boy or girl, and that heavy binary. So my way of pushing back on that was just to not get any information on the sex and just let baby be baby. But yeah, that's one of my first ideas that comes up for my body right now. There's just so much gendering happening from the womb.
One thing that comes to mind as well is holding up like someone's monogamy, or especially like long-term monogamy, as being virtuous, or like a sign of their innocence in some way. I think I was reading a petition to free someone who was detained, and obviously it's not right for anyone to be detained, but it was like part of the description of this individual was just kind of unequivocally praising him for his marriage of however many decades. And it was, I think that's an instance of, for sure, internalized settler logics at play, interfering with broader ideals of abolition.
Definitely. And I also just want to welcome Kim as well, that's joining us in the webinar. Right now, we're just going through some questions that we posed. So the question that we're in right now is how have we internalized settler logics of gender and sexuality, and how do we as community police gender and sexuality? And I'm not sure if you if you feel comfortable right now as answering the questions, or if anyone else as well would want to either give reflections from those questions. You can also put it in the chat as well. Cool. And I see Hamid.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to share something where, and this was, I was listening to and I kind of joined in late. So, but this was a trans organizer. And just when I joined the conversation, and I don't know what the background was, but they were speaking about that how the use of pronouns, and they used this language, it was the use of pronouns ghettoizes the identity. I mean, that's the language that they used, that in the sense that it just sort of creates these containers where people are kind of placed, and then that sort of like, just creates its own limitation. So I'm just kind of just thinking out loud, where there was this conversation. So like I said, I didn't hear, so I just wanted to see if people had thoughts about that. And because when you were saying, obviously the language that we are using, it's the colonizer's language, and the way our identities is also framed around pronouns and all of that. So whether that whole colonial logic and settler colonial logic has further just, and how it impacts our own agency and personhood. So yeah.
I've also heard conversations around being critical of pronouns, but there's always like conflicting, I think, community responses, right? But yeah, I think something that we've internalized in terms of settler logics of gender and sexuality are viewing sex as like inherently bad. Or any sex that's like unproductive, right? And the way that we are kind of assumed to always have like productive sex, or sex that like leads to either like, well, it's twofold, right? Like for women of color specifically, you're expected to have children, but also the state wants to sterilize you. So like cultural expectations, right? At least speaking for myself, of having children, but also state pressure to like not want you to have children and to actively try to sterilize you. My mom was like my mom actually, after she gave birth to my oldest sister, I want to say, she gave birth at Cedars-Sinai, which is wild because it's like a rich people hospital. But she gave birth in like the 1984 to my oldest sister, and they were basically pushing papers onto her, right, to sign for sterilization or a hysterectomy. And she, immigrant woman, doesn't speak English, right? Post-labor, she ended up signing them, but when it came to the actual procedure, like she refused. So it's right, this history that the history of like control over women's bodies and like non-men's bodies, but also thinking about how, I don't know, I've just been so frustrated, I think, with our communities and the way that they deal with like sex workers, non-men who like to have a lot of sex, or non-men who, like to sleep around, our own assumptions of how each gender should present themselves, right? Or creating these binaries as well that are like, you're either femme or math. And if you don't, right, if you're not consistent with your gender presentation, then somehow you're like a fake or something. When really all these binaries, right, were created through colonization and slavery, and don't really apply to people of color. And we have direct examples, right, of our cultures having different gender variations and different roles in community. But yet there's still, you know, intense transphobia within Latinx communities, intense transphobia and homophobia and all these things. So it's frustrating because I also don't want to be in queer spaces with non-POC, right?
Yeah, thank you for naming that, Kim. And I think when in the reflections of like how yeah how we've internalized that, I also think of like, I mean, the state and the state being like the state not being the shit, and being the oppressive system that it is, how it's often utilizing like co-optation. So I think of like even in certain facilities, right, you start to hear those starting conversations about like making sure that like folks are being placed into detention centers where they like where it's affirming of their gender, without also understanding that like who is heavily targeted, who is heavily policed, who's heavily surveilled, and like yeah, who is the state constantly like spending their resources to target because of like these ideas of like autonomy, these ideas of being people having the agency and people knowing themselves better than the state is already considered outside of those principles of the state, because the state was never created with consent. The state was never created like to like for our best interest as well. So I think of like in that of how like the state's constantly trying to co-opt it as well, while never recognizing like the conditions that like force folks into into the conditions and into the realities that folks had to survive and to live through.
That also really reminds me of the way that gender and sexuality is weaponized by the police state to, you know, have more gender responsive prisons. You could just get rid of prison. Or, for example, the MacArthur Park sweep, where they directly cited Mara violence against trans women, migrant trans women, for the cause of, you know, all these gang junctions and over policing of working poor people in MacArthur Park. And while that violence does exist, it's also like trans women are not going to be safe under police, right? Sex workers aren't going to be safe around police. So it's, I really like me how you always mention like how the state kind of co-ops our communities, right? Who never really like, for example, all the anti-gay legislation in other countries is a direct result of like colonization, Christianity. But it's always seen as this like, oh, that's them, that's not us, we're better than that, right? Which is always wild.
Oh, and I know we also have some new folks that joined in. Right now, we're just going through, we're kind of diving into the questions, how we internalize settler logics of gender and sexuality, and how we as community police gender and sexuality. And feel free if folks want to chime in or kind of put their reflections or state their reflections from those questions. Feel free to either unmute yourself or to put it on the chat as well. Well, I'm not sure, folks. If folks do want to speak on that question, feel free to mute yourself or put it on the chat or raise your hand. But I just put on the chat as well the second question that we wanted to collectively dive into as well. And so the second question's how can we center queer and trans people within our movement of abolition? And what does that, how do folks envision that as well? And feel free to unmute yourself as well or put it on the chat if folks have reflections on that question. And just to reiterate for folks, the question that we're going through right now is how can we center queer and trans people within our movement of abolition?
Yeah, I think I can chime in on both questions. One, I kind of think about in regards to how we've internalized settler logics. For me, something that's always been glaring for me is I was born in Ethiopia, and I'd go back there up until my teens, and it's not uncommon for like teenage like men, boys to be very affectionate with one another. Like even if you're close friends with somebody, you hold hands walking down the street, like you kiss your friends on the cheek. And like, obviously we don't have that type of affection among like cishet dudes here in the United States. I feel like that's, while Ethiopia is in no way immune to like settler colonialism, I feel like that's something we've kind of really adapted and internalized here, like just making it like not okay to be affectionate and show love to your friends. That's something I think about quite often. And in regards to how we center queer and trans people within our movement of abolition, I mean, obviously we can do better about it. And I certainly can do better about remembering that, but I try to remind myself that just the maxim that, once Black trans femmes are free, we're all free. And just like kind of focusing on the systems of oppression that really zero in on our Black trans femme siblings, and working to dismantle that. And it'll lead to our collective liberation. So that's kind of what I think of.
So thank you, Matheus. Does anyone else want to chime in or have any reflections on this question? Or either question as well?
I'm just generally thinking about how not easy it is for me or other family members to just be. For me to be means being pansexual and polyamorous, loving folks regardless of gender identity, and being able to love multiple folks. And I didn't grow up with a lot of examples of that. I come from both grandparents are arranged marriage on my dad's side from my grandparents, and on my mom's side, her parents are also. My grandma didn't really want to be with my grandpa, so but they stuck through those relationships, which feels very colonial to me, and religious, and those things go together. So yeah, I had bad examples of heterosexual relationships that were forced, and to me that also relates to rape, gender and sexuality, and rape, and colonization, and rape just being a main part of colonization and a main part of relationships that are unwanted. And just, yeah, but the impact on me is struggling to just be, because I didn't see any examples or any support of my type of being. And that to me directly comes from coming from colonized lineages. That's what I'm processing.
Yeah, thank you for naming that, Mariela. Yeah, and I've been sitting as well with those, like, even within my own like lineage as well, and like in like, yeah, even within like my own family structure as well, of like how like my sexuality isn't really like, it was a one-time conversation, and then it's like we don't really want to hear, or we don't want to talk about it. It's like kind of like you do you on your side, but don't bring it within that. And so part of it is also like those dynamics and like what it looks like within like nuclear settings, and like whether it means stepping back from your family, whether it means like having chosen family, whatever it means, as far as like both the protection as well, and like of being able to navigate that, and understanding that like for a lot of folks it's like our families and those kind of those notions, sometimes there isn't that you can't reconcile sometimes those relationships. You can't reconcile the differences of like someone not seeing you, and so yeah, I think of that like in those family dynamics, and in even just like my own principles of like not like, I don't believe in like the marriage. I don't believe in marriage, and I don't believe in the institution of marriage, especially how it's like how it historically has been utilized, and like it's like we're so easy to criminalize folks for like for survival, criminalize like sex workers, but yet these institutions that are rooted in like not through consent, and through patriarchy, and through like transphobic and homophobic like ideologies and religion, it's like still heavily ingrained within that. And I remember going into the village and being asked like how like if you're coming with if you're coming with a partner, how much livestock are you going to give in order to like legitimize that as well. And so yeah, definitely sitting within that, as far as like it is complicated. It is complicated. Those conversations are really complicated, but I think um being able to like, if you are able to have those conversations to push that, and if not, then sometimes it's making sure that you're setting that boundary as well, and deciding to do what's best for you as well, and honoring whatever whatever is best for you, especially in those dynamics. Cool. And I just want to leave it to if folks have any last comments as well. If not, we can go to the next portion of the webinar, which is we're gonna do a recap on the policing of sex work working group, and the ongoing work that we have been doing as well. And so I'm not sure if folks do want to recap that, please feel free to raise your hand or to put it on the chat as well. But if not, we can get started on the second portion of the webinar, which is the recaps of the policing of sex work.
Sounds good. I just want to name, I think it's Isaiah comment on how we can center queer and trans people within our movement. We can help people fight these laws across these lands, especially in the Midwest and the South, that are criminalizing trans youth. So I just wanted to name that as a maybe closing and jump off point for more organizing with this. But that's definitely one way we could center folks and fight and decolonize all the different things that each of us were sharing. Thank you for bringing that. So if there aren't any other comments, as Nee said, we can get into our work around sex work being criminalized. I believe Kim and Chela were going to help take lead on that. Whoever feels ready to share, take lead. Thank you.
Yeah. So maybe we can start a conversation about the way that so we're right now we have a sex worker surveillance working group, which I've been trying to come up with like a name that's like witty, sex working. I don't know. Anyway. So we have met with US pros, and I was able to reach some folks at Swap LA who are also interested in really, right now our main focus has been getting out public requests and working with US pros with the language around what happened shortly after the Super Bowl and how there was raids and basically how LAPD and the Sheriff's Department was using using human trafficking and sex trafficking as justifications for these raids, right? And somehow they were arguing that during the Super Bowl, there's an increase in human trafficking, which there was an LA Times article that debunked that, right? So we're working with US Prostitutes Network, Swap LA to develop a public request. What are they called? Public request record, record of public request, whatever it's called. Sorry. We're developing language to be able to get data and really figure out who got arrested, how many of those folks were trans, non-binary, or folks misgendered when it came to California Public Request, CPRA request. Thank you, Me. So it's thinking about how what happened right post Super Bowl. So many people were caught up in the raids, were caught up in the sweeps. And we really want to get a better understanding of how the police state is targeting sex workers underground in specific areas in Los Angeles. And, you know, if we could somehow compare our data to like LA locations, we have already a working group set up for that. We want to map different areas, right, where sex workers are experiencing specific types of police harassment, whether street walking, and or we also want to develop public education tools on demystifying, right, sex trafficking versus consensual sex work, demystifying our ideas around sex work, right, because there's a lot of people that are still literally calling the cops on sex workers, just like random people from the neighborhood, right, who are so invested in this rhetoric of like morality and crime busting or whatever that they're reporting sex workers, they're taking down license number plates, right? So yeah, we want to look into all of that. Me and Tiff have done really great work around specifically identifying the technologies such as I want to say it's called Cellbrite.
Yeah, Cellbrite is one of the technologies. I think TIFF kind of started putting more of that information together, but it's something that LAPD has been utilizing, and it's a device, and I believe it comes from an Israeli company. So even like the global ties as well, and like the military and like how that also gets utilized, but it's a tool or a machine that essentially when folks are getting detained and arrested, it could extract data from your phone, including like contact information, including different points in your cell phone without having to require your passcode, and then it extracts that as well to like kind of piece together like who clients are to be able to provide that information as well to LAPD or to the police department.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Yeah, so we're doing work around that and also trying to engage in conversations, right, where we don't necessarily say even non-sex workers get harassed and targeted, even though that's true, right? But no one should be harassed or targeted, sex worker or not. So really developing language around that, and it's really exciting. We're gonna meet April 7th at 5 p.m. And if you all want to either email me or the coalition for a Zoom link, we also have it on our calendar. Thank you so much, Nate, for that. And yeah, so I really wanted to have a conversation around how trans, sorry, cannot multitask, how trans sex workers face a very specific oppression, right, than non-trans sex workers and non-sex worker trans people face. And I wanted to invite Chela, who's also part of the SWAP LA Sex Worker Outreach Project board and has done a lot of amazing organizing work around sex workers, trans Black women, and police.
Yeah, hey everyone. Kim, thank you for leading that. I mean, you pretty much did most of it, but I will just talk a little bit briefly about, I'm about to sneeze, give me a second. Okay, I thought I was gonna sneeze. I'm gonna talk a little bit, warning, there's the alarm, it still hasn't been fixed, if y'all know. My alarm has been going off like that, so just bear with me. So trans, just like, you know, with anything, like trans folks there's a specific targeted situation with specifically trans women, right? So when trans women are picked up and arrested, they are not sent to women's jails. They are not even asked certain questions that could make them safer, you know? And there's no real way to make them safer in the hands of police, right? Like in the hands of the state. But there's always targeted things around how, like, LAPD knows literally that trans folks are like one of the highest populations to engage in sex work, and so they criminalize them and they put them in the wrong gendered jails and prisons, which opens them up to more acts of violence. Everything from not being given their medicines, the hormones that they take, to not having access to a therapist, to the really rough shit, like physical and sexual assault, in which girls are told not to tell people about it, because when they tell people about it, it gets the pigs in trouble. And it gets the state in trouble. And then there's like an internal investigation. And so trans girls really opt to stay quiet a lot of the times. I know so many stories where trans girls were arrested, even if it's not for sex work, and they were sexually assaulted by a pig, and the pigs were, they had more retaliation against them when it was found out, right? So there's just this never-ending cycle, right, of like violence, criminalization and violence, criminalization and violence. Criminalization is violence, but yeah, there's also just like thinking of, like, in other terms, street-based sex work is where most trans women go to, right? And there are more specific areas that trans women are more likely to work. And so police are always targeting those areas, places around MacArthur Park, especially because it's being gentrified, places around downtown Pico Union area and WeHo, you know, the Santa Monica Strip. And so those places are really targeted, right? Not only that, but we also look at the fact that it's specifically trans women of color, right? Black and brown trans women are a higher percentage to have these things happen to them. I'm hoping that I'm making sense, y'all. Back to you, Kim, if you have anything to wrap it up with.
I just want to wrap it up with join us. April 7th, 5 p.m. with our working group. I personally, I don't think, does anyone in our group know like tech stuff? We have a separate like tech mapping group that's going to help us actually do the physical map. So you don't need any prior experience with anything. If you're interested in the work, we are so excited to build with U.S. Prostitutes Network, Stop LA, and to really make this a great resource. So yeah, thank you. And thank you so much, Chella.
Yeah, thank you both.
Sorry, I was just can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So, Kim,
No.
would this also be, because I know that on previous occasions, we have, there was interest with, it's been a couple of years now, this is pre-COVID, when we first, or maybe during COVID, early COVID, talked to Wes and some of the other folks at SWAP, Chella, and there was interest in speaking about the possibilities or the impact of hotspot policing. You know, like with the zones, for example, like predpol zones, and of course we were able to, you know, just dismantle those programs, but they've taken on different shapes as well. So in a sense, how does it affect, you know, street sex work? And then there was also interest in this, this definitely goes further back with when we were talking to folks at Hacking and Hustling and all, that especially the interest in the stalker state as the information sharing environment, and how does that have its impact around data collection on online sex work. So I'm just kind of, you know, throwing them out there that there was definitely in the past, we've seen these these interests in people too. So yeah, I'm happy to support that any which way.
I thought there was a question in there. Thank you, Baba. Yeah, I also, one more thing, and I totally failed to talk about the legalization of, like, you know, the fact of the matter is, like, a lot of trans women still haven't had, I forgot to add this, you know, so let me add it and we can get back to our regular schedule programming. Thinking around, like, not a lot of trans women have access and legal representation to change their name, right, and gender. And so, like, that's also another thing that also prohibits, like I said, there's no real way for pigs to be respectful to trans people, right? I remember, like, 6 years ago, Gender Justice LA, we heard about a law where trans women were no longer going to, where they're supposed to ask our genders when they pick us up and make sure that they treat us respectfully. And that was our conversation around that. It's like, is there a real respectful way to arrest us? No, there isn't. It's still violent. It's still hella intrusive, and it creates all this trauma. So yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add that, and I also wanted to add that that's it. Yeah, sorry y'all about the alarm. Living in Skid Row is real. Hashtag. And so I'm gonna mute myself and back to your regular schedule programming.
Thank you, Chella. All good with the alarm too. I just had a little light bulb for the sex working group. In Stop LAPD, we also have our Data Bodies project. When you mentioned the stalker state, Hamid, and the way that we've been mapping data collection, we've been doing that for some years. And recently, I just had a meeting last week with some other team members from our Data Bodies project. We got some resources to do some more work focused on surveillance of workers, and we should make sure that we include sex workers in those interviews and organizing research on the ground that we're going to be doing. So I would love to join this Thursday at 5, the team, and see how I could help hold part of that too.
Yes, please join us. We're gonna be one of the cool activities that we're gonna be doing, and something that like I know Kim has been in conversations as well with SWAP about potentially getting together to like put together this popular education piece about like what types of surveillance has been utilized to target and surveil sex workers. And then we're hoping that once we're done kind of putting the zine together, that we could join SWAP LA as well in one of their outreach to continue to make sure that people have access to this information and the types of surveillance that LAPD and just that the police state has and can utilize to surveil and to target sex workers. And so that's something that we're going to be doing on Thursday, and that's the 7th at 5 p.m. And I'm going to just share a screen real quick just so folks can see how to access the calendar. You can go to the Google Calendar. You could also go to the Stop LAPD Spying. Sorry, bear with me. You can go to Stop LAPD Spying, and on meetings, there's a meeting calendar tab, which has all the different working groups. So you'll see here the 5 p.m., the policing of sex work, and then it will have the information. So if it's virtual or if it's hybrid or in person, it'll have a description about what it is, and then how you would be able to access it. But if folks are ever interested or have some free time and want to check out what working groups or meetings we might have, you can, the calendar is updated pretty regularly. So if you're free and want to come into any of the working groups, feel free to utilize the calendar to save it on your calendar as well. So that way you can kind of be alerted of the different working groups that we might be having or the different meetings. Oh, well, thank you all so much for, what is it, the 60, is it 60 or 70s webinar number?
Today was 97th.
Shit, I'm way, I'm way up.
Since March 24th, 2020, yeah.
I swear I was paying attention in the beginning.
All good.
No, but thank y'all so much for joining us for our gender and sexuality webinar. The gender and sexuality webinar is the first Tuesday of each month. And then next on the 12th, we're going to be having our War on Youth webinar for Tuesday. So please tune in for either any of the working groups or for our next webinar on Tuesday for the fight against the war on youth. But thank y'all so much for coming through and spending your Tuesday night or Tuesday with us. And feel free to reach out through email or through the chat if folks would want to get involved or have any questions as well.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, y'all. Have
Take
a
care.
good night.